2, 1, 2. Hi, my name is Jacqui Sutton, and I'm a jazz and bluegrass singer. I turned 50, and instead of buying a red sports car, I started a garage band.
I close my eyes and you're there with me.
Well, not a band, but a mini orchestra, and I call it the Frontier Jazz Orchestra. And it all came together in my debut CD, Billie and Dolly. It's an homage to my two favorite female vocalists, Billie Holiday and Dolly Parton. Now, I get raised eyebrows when I put those two names together, but to me they are both soul singers.
Weary angel, oh, I know I have been a heavy cross.
In my early 20s, I got my start in jazz singing with a vocal jazz ensemble called Jazz Mouth. Now, this was San Francisco in the 1980s, and people like Bobby McFerrin and Tuck and Patty were on the rise. I kind of left my heart in San Francisco, literally, and a few years later I moved to Portland, Oregon, where I have no idea how I got turned on to this, but I started contra dancing. And for people who don't know what contra dancing is, it's like square dancing, except you do it in line patterns. So, you have the same calls, Alaman left, do-si-do, swing your partner. I know. Here's this black woman do-si-doing and Alaman lefting the bluegrass music. But I'll tell you, the organizers of these dancers always had the most amazing bluegrass musicians accompanying the dancers. I finally figured out that I could blend jazz and bluegrass and even classical music vocally because I just love it all, and I didn't want to have to choose one. Now, I consider myself a fairly straight singer. I'll embellish a little bit here or there, maybe I'll choose an alternate note, but I approach singing as existing completely in the context of the orchestration. And that's just my style.
A blue mountain and it's rolling between you and me.
This style is what I call frontier jazz. And people ask me, well, what does the frontier mean? It's two things. First, it's the sound of the American frontier, the folk instruments like the banjo, which happens to be my favorite instrument on the planet, the mandolin, the fiddle, and the bass. And vocally, it's that high, lonesome Bill Monroe, Del McCoury sound, and that just gets to the base of your brain and it breaks your heart. And it's the yodel.
No such luck, another day of crying. Don't know how much more my old heart.
Second, I love orchestral music, and when I think about the American frontier in classical terms, I think of Aaron Copland's frontier. I hear those violins, the cello, the folk strains that Copland adopted and turned into masterpieces like Appalachian Spring. So to my ear, the frontier sound is both folk and classical music. And then there's jazz, that uniquely American art form which moves me as deeply as a bluegrass high, lonesome song.
The great mama may have, oh, papa may have, but God bless the child.
Now, my kindred spirits in this musical experiment that I'm calling Frontier Jazz are some of Houston's finest jazz and classical musicians, and together they helped me create this frontier jazz sound. When it came time to put this mashed up jazz, bluegrass, orchestral sound into writing, the first order of business was finding an arranger. A bass player friend referred me to Henry Dara, who happens to be a wonderful jazz pianist, a vocalist, a trombone player, and a big band arranger, which was exactly what I needed. So I ran my concept by Henry, and he did not run away. In fact, he jumped right into it.
As you get nearer, you fall and you fall, faster and faster you go.
And when he heard me referring to the band as kind of like an orchestra, he wrote these beautiful brass chorales for songs like God Bless the Child and My Man's Gone Now. Henry really got me. So Paul Chester. Paul is an incredibly talented jazz guitarist who also happens to play my favorite instrument, the banjo. Now Paul plays a 6-string banjo. It's tuned like a guitar, but he gets a very unique banjo sound out of it. And his banjo playing is a major musical thread. Sometimes he's playing rhythm, but more often than not, he's playing beautiful, tasteful leads and rolls that are essential to this sound. Max Dyer. Max plays with the Houston Ballet and freelances on a ton of independent recordings. Now the cello provides what the Sufis call the nectar. It absolutely runs through the sound. It creates a beautiful balance in the mix, and it alternately provides the classical and the bluegrass elements of the frontier jazz sound. He can play a bluegrass fiddle solo or bow some of the most beautiful lines on that cello. Sometimes Max is forceful, sometimes he's assertive and passionate, and other times he has this light honey in the background. And he is a consummate musician. He is really inspiring to watch because he becomes so much of what he's playing through his cello. Anthony Sapp. Anthony is probably the busiest bass player in Houston, and how I managed to get him for such an intense rehearsal process is beyond me. Anthony is as comfortable with jazz as he is with funk and classical. For Mississippi Song, which is in 7/8, so it's an odd meter, and it's somewhat classical, he really held down a rapidly moving bass line with so much finesse. But then with a song like Weary Angel, which is a bluegrass gospel tune, he introduced a beautiful funk rhythm as he and Ilya Llanos, the percussionist, they were just riffing during workshop of the song. Dennis Dotson was a trumpet soloist in the Woody Herman Big Band. So do I need to say more? He has years of experience in one little finger, and he can hear just about anything. Whether he's playing tasteful fills in a song like Lazy Afternoon, or forceful horn hits like the ones Henry created for Risk, or he's playing a melancholy solo in Weary Angel, Dennis has all those years of experience to draw on, to say just the right thing, to set just the right tone in his soloing or his accenting even. In fact, he introduced me to his piccolo trumpet during our debut performance of Where the Music Comes From, and I was blown away by his versatility. Ilya Llanos. Now from the very first rehearsal, Ilya jumped in with both feet. Now I don't use a drum kit in my songs, I really like to use percussion instead. So the rhythm is held together by percussion and other rhythm instruments like the bass and the guitar. So Ilya shows up regularly with a truck full of percussive gadgets to add different flavors to each song. So for most of the songs, he plays a cajon. But he has used an African djembe, a Brazilian tantan, and so many other percussive effects I can't even name them all. Aralee DeRoe. Now Aralee is the principal flutist for the Houston Symphony, and we just happened to be neighbors. Through a series of conversations, we discovered we were both musicians. So when it came time to record Billy and Dolly, I knew I wanted her, especially on Sleepin' Bee. That song is really a duet between the voice and the flute, and it was really startling and awe-inspiring to hear Aralee make those bee sounds come from her flute. Her sound also contributes to the classical part of the frontier jazz sound. I want to talk about the engineering for Billy and Dolly. I went to Stormy Cooper Media, and they were amazing. So I'm going to start with the sound engineer, who is Lyndon Hughes. He's not only a talented audio engineer, but a wonderful singer and percussionist as well. Keeper is from the world of musical theater, and I needed a straight but rich quality in the male vocals. And that was Lyndon through and through.
Keeper of your ever-present love.
And Lyndon and I also mesh not just vocally, but artistically. He really gets me, and as an engineer, he approached all of the songs on Billy and Dolly with that same aesthetic understanding. I don't think I could have achieved the sound quality that I was reaching for without the help of Lyndon and Stormy Cooper, the owner of Stormy Cooper Media. Stormy took me, a total unknown, and rolled out the red carpet so that I could experiment. They made the studio my second home, and they worked like crazy to give me exactly what I wanted. And I am really grateful for their belief in me.
The first time you do it, it's going to be the last time it's very like you just give us a
Now, creating the frontier jazz sound required a lot of rehearsal, and that meant that the rehearsal process required lots of planning and workshopping. These musicians stuck it out through intense weekly rehearsals, a week of studio rehearsals before we even recorded, and then the recording process itself. And even when we prepare for gigs now, the rehearsals are very important because I'm always adding new songs to the set list, and everybody has to keep the old stuff in their muscle memory, including me. For Billy and Dolly for the CD, there are only 2 songs on the CD that give direct homage to Billy and Dolly. That would be God Bless the Child and Endless Stream of Tears. The other 9 songs are my take on songs that I have loved for many years, and I perform them in this mashed up frontier jazz style. And so for the longest time, I think my merry band of musicians thought that I was kind of crazy. But we'd work on the music and rehearsal, and we'd come out of it with something that I think blended the styles in a really cohesive way. And one example is a song that we just debuted at the Billy and Dolly CD release concert at Rice University here in Houston. Lee Hoiby is a classical composer of art songs, and there's this one song, Where the Music Comes From, that I have loved for a long time, and it's usually done in classical recital style like, I want to be where the music comes from, where the clock stops, where it's now. Kind of like that. And it has a form that kind of keeps repeating. It modulates up a whole step each time you repeat the form. Because of these modulations, I kept hearing the song as kind of a progressive rock, a bluegrass, jazz anthem. You know, I could hear Freddie Mercury singing We Are the Champions in this thing. So the anthem needed a kind of march-like feel underneath it. So Elia came through on his cajon, and I told Paul Chester that I wanted to start out with the banjo, but on the vamp out, I really wanted a rock guitar blitz. And I wanted a classical sound from the trumpet and the piano, with the double bass keeping the support for the jazz sound. So I sent the group a YouTube clip of a young woman singing this song in traditional classical style, and when we got to rehearsal, they were like, you are crazy. We don't know what this is about. But we rehearsed it, and once we did, they were surprised at how much fun it was to play. So that's just one example. I mean, I've learned over the years to trust what I hear, and the Frontier Jazz Orchestra helps me turn what I hear into musical reality.
And the risk is what you get when you get out of your bed. And these are all the dreams that you are sleeping through instead. Risk is what you get when you get out of your bed.
So in the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Risk is what you get when